Hey guys, post A100 I thought I'd get back to some videos going over Avid features and workflows, and so for this one I'm going to focus on the timeline. So I'm going to look at some flows and some features that you can enable on the timeline to help keep everything tidier, more organised, and get to it faster. So let's dive in. Right, so let's start with an obvious one, colour coding. Colour coding on the timeline can save you a lot of time just because you can visually jump to stuff and you know where it is. And with the nature of colour coding, there's a whole different lot of ways you can do this. It's whatever makes sense to you. So I'll tell you what I would normally do is for my audio, nice and simple. I'll have a colour for my dialogue, colour for my sound effects, colour for my music, so that I can quickly separate those because I like to have them on different tracks, especially as we get towards the end of an edit. And if they're colour coded, I can see if they're on the wrong track and quickly just move them up and down. Really helps for exporting stems and everything if you have, that nice and neatly organised. If you're an assistant, definitely worth doing. If you're an editor, your assistant will really be appreciative if you do this, at least colour coding it, and then it will give them a head start when they need to reorder it towards the end of the project. In terms of video though, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could do this. How I like to do it is I colour code scenes by character, by who's in it. So for example, this is the treasurer, and I had blue was colour coded for our lead character, Jerry. These pink sections focus on his wife, Martha. The purple areas have both of them, the scenes with them together. And the yellow section here is a climactic confrontational scene between Jerry and another character called Colin. Now, the main advantage to doing this method is I can see at a glance how much screen time each character's got. Now, I'll tell you, this was particularly most helpful when I was cutting my first feature film, Northspur, and I was able to divide the scenes into 2 or 3 characters, and then track the timeline based on the colour coding that way. And then I was very quickly able to sort of see how much time I was spending on the different subplots. So you can assign the colours and colour all the different scene clips based on a subplot or a character. It's just you'll be able to see when you zoom out on the timeline like this how much screen time you're giving to different things if you categorize it this way. And it really helps as you're trying to finesse the edit towards the end. So here I've just pulled that Avid project out of the archive for that feature film. Finished it a couple of years ago, but as you can see here, it's still relatively tidy. I've got my music here down the bottom. I've coloured it purple in this instance. Sound effects are blue, and my dialogue is either green or the colour of the clip it's attached to. And you can see of my scene colouring here. Blue was our lead character Kellen. Yellow scenes were another lead character called Marshall. Marshall and Kellen were sort of the 2 main leads. And anything orange was with Kellen and Marshall together. And you can see that we're cutting back to his wife every so often as the pink scenes come back. And that would be her own plot, her own stories that ran throughout the film. And when you zoom out on the timeline like this, we get a sense, and you sort of just learn to recognize, as you become very familiar with the project, which scenes they are, based on where they are. And so you can think about reordering them, or if that was earlier, or, there's way too much of Kellen at the start, so maybe we should spread that story out a bit, or, we'll finish with that story a bit early and then we don't come back to it till the end. We should, move some of the pink across. So trust me, this really did help me towards the end to just keep a logical grasp on where everybody was at any given time throughout the film. Now, while we're here, we're talking about clip colouring. I just wanted to show you something that is fairly standard when it comes to VFX editor workflows, but may not be known outside of that. So it's quite often to have a subcap layer with all of your VFX IDs on the timeline. And so these are just subcaps, with the ID types, in lower right or lower left of your frame. But you can actually color code these, color code the effect by placing media inside it. So you can see I've made the plate to turn over to the visual effects house, and then put a superimpose of 0% to just basically make it invisible, and then placed it inside the subcap. And that means that if I change the color of this clip in its bin of the media that I put inside that subcap, it will be reflected on the timeline. This is particularly handy, or at least what I've used it mostly for, is, for example, VFX IDs. When I'm preparing it, I can use the color to denote the status of that VFX shot. So whether it's still being prepped is orange. If it's been turned over, I'll make it green. And if we've got the VFX shot back, if we know it's all done, then I'll change the ID to white. And then, you know, we know we're hunky-dory. And then just by scrubbing up and down on the timeline, we can see the status of things without having to refer to documents and things like that. I actually really don't like paperwork. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Particularly, you know, PDFs or paperwork. I like to have as much data in the Avid project as I can attached to the clips as metadata or color coded or something like that, so that all my tracking, I don't have to really leave Avid Media Composer to take care of. And the second instance of what I've used this for is for building reels in films. So I'll do the same thing, a subcap layer across the, you know, a reel of the film, and then just get a bunch of blank media as long as it's long enough to fit, insert it into the reel, insert it into the subcap, and then I can color code the reels based on, you know, the status that they are. Maybe we've locked one reel, but we're still tinkering with another. Those of you who are cutting feature films will know that it's fairly common to split it into reels as you get towards the end of the film and you're starting to do turnovers to sound and VFX and things. But you might be doing all those turnovers before you've locked, and you're locking the films in pieces. So here in this case, as I'm doing it, I'm actually using a timecode generator as opposed to subcap. I'm just dropping my superimpose 0% effect on it, because the timecode generator will just read the name of the clip, and then I'll be able to change the name of the clips in the bin, and then it'll take effect in the burn-in. So I'll never have to open this effect again, essentially, which is always my goal. That's why I love the timecode generator. Timecode generator and 3D Warp, absolute favourite effects in Avid Media Composer. And this is just blank bit of media, just a random mix down. Really doesn't matter what it is, it's going to be invisible. In fact, if it's got nothing to do with your project, even better, because then if you've forgotten your superimpose, it makes it, you know, that much more obvious to spot it. So cutting this in, throw in the superimpose, and now what I'll do is I'll put my bins here so as you can see. So I've got my timeline down here, and my random bits of media that are labelled reel 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 5. And now if I colour these, watch reel 2 here, I'll make it blue. My timecode generator changes to blue, and well, it's the media inside it. But then this means that I've got my reels marked. I can mark a big chunk of the timeline and just see at a glance as well. I don't have to go into my markers window and jump to the right marker to find my reel. I can see at a glance where the reels are, what the status of them is. And I'll tell you, this actually came in really, really handy on a project called Scrooge, where I was the lead assistant on, it was an animated feature film. It's my first time being in animation. I had done a bunch of visual effects stuff, but this is my first time in animation. And we had broken the film into a bunch of different sequences. I think we had about 44 sequences we had broken it down to. And then each one of those sequences the animators were regularly feeding us shots for, but they're sort of treating it as 44 individual little projects in a way. Which is a common enough workflow for them. And so we would have a slug like this, using this exact same method on top of each one, and we would regularly be color coding the slug at the top to read the status of what any particular sequence was at any given time. And it really did save us a lot of time because we could quickly export stuff, and we could quickly mark a reel just by selecting that track and hitting T to mark clip, and then we could export a reel really quickly as well. So this is it's just a really handy way to sort of show status and color coding and read data of sections of a timeline. Probably more useful in larger timelines, like feature films or long format TV series, but it's definitely a good one to have in your back pocket if you ever come into those situations. Right, now this timeline here is a good one to demonstrate this next example on, because this timeline wasn't cut by me, and I joined the project as assistant later on, so the initial setup wasn't done by myself. And so this is just one thing that I would do to keep things tidier as we go on. You know, whether I was the assistant or the editor of the project, this is something you could make happen. So wherever there's a visual effects shot and they've stacked a bunch of clips in order to make the effect. In fact, let's find a more complicated one. Yeah, how about this one? If you see a bunch of clips like this and they're all stacked, and they've had to do that to do their animate masking and build their effect and whatnot, and that's fine. You know, I find this very messy and I don't like it, especially if you're nearing the lock of a project. You're away from the assembly stage where you're playing about and you're just throwing clips everywhere. You know, you're gearing towards a time where stuff should be tidy. So how I would just tidy this up is I would collapse this working here for starters. So just using the collapse icon after selecting them. And then I would just move these onto a track on their own. And I would have all of the visual effects work across all shots on a separate track, collapsed and nested. So you can still, you know, punch into the nest and you know, fix stuff up and tinker with the effects if you need to, but it keeps it out the way and it keeps the timeline tidy. And I will also always keep a clean version of the plate, if it's a comp, the background plate, on V1 on the timeline, since that's what's likely to be in your timecode readers and your burn-ins and stuff like that. And you want a clean one just down there that's not stacked on top of a bunch of stuff or got a bunch of effects on it that could potentially interfere with burn-ins. If you have it on V1 and you can set your reader to just read V1 across the timeline, and then you know you're getting a true, accurate reader of all the clips that you want to see. So that's a way to keep your VFX tidy. Right, now this next one isn't so much of an Avid feature, it's more just a general tip. And that is that on your lunch break, whenever you're leaving the Avid for a while, render the timeline. Just to, you know, I know Avid is very, very good at playing back effects on the fly. And you could, and I have gone entire projects without having ever rendered anything. And it's perfectly fine. But there's if you're on a feature or if you're on a large project, there's a good chance that you could go weeks worth. You could go weeks where large portions of your project don't change, like the visual effects work and stuff like that. It doesn't change much. And so if you've had it rendered, it would just stay that way and it wouldn't need re-rendered again or tinkered with. So whenever you go for your lunch or anything like that, if you set your timeline to render, it will make your exports faster because Avid's got a lot less work to do. It doesn't have to encode your renders and your effects work and then, make its compression and its encoding on top of that. So yeah, it'll just save you some time come export time if everything's rendered. Right, now another thing is just the general color scheme of your timeline. So I like a custom timeline background. It's something that's going to contrast with all the greys of the timeline and the tracks itself. I've chose a kind of greeny color here. And this is really easy to set. Just in your settings, user settings, just go to interface and timeline and viewers, and then there's use custom timeline background, and then you can set this to whatever you like. Of any of these colors here, or you can bring up the custom color picker and choose literally any color you want. And it doesn't have to be super vibrant and in your face color, just something that's going to contrast with what's on your timeline, on your tracks, and also highlight this background area that we do occasionally click on to get out of stuff like effects and trim mode and things like that, so that that area is, you know, very clear to see. Oh, and speaking of tinkering settings for stuff like that, now you notice here, if I zoom right into my reel, say that's reel 2 here, so we can see the clip name on the timeline, on the clip, as you can with all your clips. If I change this reel 2 to say I'll make it something really bright, like this peachy color, right? That reel 2 is kind of hard to read, you know, because the default timeline text is this white color. And you can change it to black, but then you might have the opposite issue if you are coloring your clips a darker color. But there is a brilliant Avid setting where it will dynamically choose white or black based on the clip coloring. So you can get to this from your timeline settings. And then under the display tab, down the bottom, there's the timeline text color menu. So if I change this to white and black timeline text, then as soon as I OK that, you see this changes to black, and so did these ones, but these ones stayed white, because white would be a better color to display the text on that particular clip color, against that background. White will show up better against that blue background. So just having that by default always enables, set it once and then forget it. It's going to, you know, just make your clips a lot easier to read on the timeline in general. And you know, and anything us editors can do to put a little less strain on the eyes is greatly appreciated. Right, now this last one I've deliberately left to last because it is a brand new feature that has been released in the very latest version of Avid in 2022.10 at time of recording. And the feature itself allows us to create custom sequence templates. So a custom templates of a layout of your sequence, and this is the number of tracks, the starting time code, even the naming of the tracks. So if there's a certain way you like your timeline to be generally laid out, or if you have a few different ways you like them laid out for different purposes, you can have those saved as templates and just call them up at will. So to make one of these, if you right click in your timeline area and go create sequence template, I'll go called J editing. I'm going to rush through this a little quick because I've already done a deep dive into it on my video that shows what's new in Avid 2022.10. If you haven't already checked that out, you know, you can check it out there. There's a whole bunch of new features and I demonstrate them all and show how they all work over there. But I will do a demonstration here. So create new setting, got J editing, create, and here we can add video and audio tracks. So I'll have 3 video tracks. Let's make it 4, why not? And then audio, I'll have, say, just to be safe, I'm going to have 14. So if I was doing a short film or something, this would definitely be plenty for me. And my music will be at the bottom here, so I'll just make those stereo. Name my track music, and then I can just copy that into there. And then I'll have this as sound effects. And I'll give myself 5 tracks for dialogue. Up top left here, I can set our starting time code. So as I said before, I like 5950. So I'll set that. Oh, keyboard's low on battery. That's fine. It'll get us through the end of this recording. Should I bother rename a video track? I'll just name it audio tracks for the template, I think. You know, I can create more video tracks and rename them on a per project basis. But that gives me a very good starting point. You know, I've got 2 stereo music tracks. I've got 2 mono sound effects tracks and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stereo sound effects tracks. Most of my sound effects are stereo, and I like to work with stereo tracks if I can. And I've got 5 dialogue tracks. So that would be plenty for me, particularly for a short film or a TV series, anything that's not going to be too complicated. If I was doing a feature or a long form show, I'd maybe want a bit more for each category, but that'll work plenty for me. So I'll hit save. And now if I go new sequence and select that template, it's created a sequence to that spec. And this is going to save you a lot of time on your timeline. And both, it'll save you time if you're someone who likes to create custom layouts and organized tracks and name tracks and stuff like that. And if you're not the kind of person who normally does this could maybe get you into the habit and keep you tidier and save you time later on. Because if you have a template for it and then you don't have to bother renaming everything each time, so that's nice and already there for you from the get-go, then you might just feel the tug to, you know, have things on the right track as you're moving them around and as you go. So thanks, Avid. Really do appreciate that one. I like it. Right, guys, but that concludes this video on tips and workflows for keeping your timeline in tip-top shape. I hope it was useful for you. I hope you found something that can help you. I am the Avid assistant, so I'm here to assist you in any way that I can. So if anything didn't make sense, or if you want me to go into anything in more detail or show it again, just leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. That is in between my very rare moments of ever actually finding time to sleep. Can't remember the last time I did that. Yes. I'm going to go do that, I think, because I do have work tomorrow. And I'm putting these on YouTube, so my boss probably sees that I'm not sleeping, so yeah. I'm gonna go get some sleep. See ya.